Have you been feeling the shift lately? If you've been feeling extra tired, mentally foggy, uncertain of what you're even doing right now, maybe even isolating socially, and especially if you've been having an active dream world, whether that is nightmares, prophetic dreams, or dreams that are really meaningful and symbolic, you are not alone. And you are part of a group of very sensitive souls who intuitively can sense what is coming. You are a part of a group of souls that can feel the timeline shift that's happening. Today, I want to talk all about that. I'm going to be covering everything from the astrology of why this is happening, how the elites have known about this and have been planning for this time for quite some time. We're going to talk about how we're seeing a lot of these themes play out in social media and in the world of film and cinema and entertainment. And then we're going to be taking a little dive into history as well. So I hope you'll stick with me till the end, because by the end of the video, you'll see the big web and the bigger picture here. So let's get into it. First of all, I just wanted to say that I practice Western astrology, and there have been a few comments on my channel about sidereal astrology and how Western isn't accurate because it doesn't align with the constellations. But I wanted to address that first. I've been practicing Western astrology and studying it for over 20 years now. And had I started with sidereal, I could have been an expert in that possibly. But the point is, I found Western astrology from a youngish age, and it's been guiding me for a long time. And just because it doesn't align with the exact constellations doesn't mean that there's not value in it. So in the same way that we assign value to a piece of paper and call it money, in the same way we all decide collectively that right now it's 2 o'clock, right now it's 4 o'clock. Daylight savings is going to shift on this day. Astrology is very similar because it's a set system. It's a system of archetypes, of energy that we have collectively decided on. And that is why there's so much momentum behind whatever kind of astrology you're teaching or practicing. If you've only been exposed to sidereal and that's your thing, it's going to work for you, likely, if you are into it. And same, let's let this pass. Woo, sunny day. Wow. Why is it so loud? This too shall pass. Okay. Gonna walk away from the sound for a second. But in the same way that sidereal works for people who've been using it and studying it, so too does Western astrology. Because when there are a lot of people who believe in something collectively, it creates something known as a pendulum in the collective field. So if you've stuck around for any of my other videos, maybe you've heard me talking about this concept from the book Reality Transurfing by Vadim Zeland. That book was totally life-changing for me. And in case you haven't heard about the book or don't know what it's about, it talks about how we essentially live in a multiverse, and it is our emotional state that aligns us with different frequencies and therefore different timelines. So if you are primarily in a lower state of vibration, so lower vibrational emotions like fear, powerless, guilt, shame, etc., then you align yourself to those timelines that also will keep you on a feedback loop of the same types of emotions that you're experiencing. But we always have a choice about what emotional frequency we're going to dip into. And when we make those choices, that is when we intersect with the new timelines and we get put on a new loop, a new frequency loop, a new time loop. And this is how it's going to intersect with the planet Saturn and astrology. And I'm so excited to talk about it. I get so jazzed up about this. So when I think of the book Reality Transurfing by Vadim Zeland, and the timelines that he mentions, and the multiverse, and how we're always shifting based on our emotional frequencies, it also makes me think of Saturn and the phrase, time is a flat circle. Makes me think of the ring of Saturn. It makes me think of the black box of Saturn that occultists talk about. The reason why Saturn is a cube is because it represents the limitations of the material world. And Saturn in astrology, these planes are crazy. I'm just gonna walk away for a minute so I can keep talking. But Saturn, oh my Lord, what is happening out here in the desert? I don't know, this is crazy. Sorry. But, okay, it keeps interrupting my video. So Saturn, Saturn and the black cube represents the limitations of our physical world, the 3D, right? 3D cube. And then Saturn in astrology represents father time. It represents karmic lessons. It represents limitations. And Saturn is also, some people refer to it as the gatekeeper of this world, might even be the gatekeeper of ascension. But if you're looking at ascension, maybe not as something so literal, like your soul is literally going to dissolve into another dimension, but you're ascending in your emotions to a different timeline and frequency. So I heard a really interesting video last night. It was by Bashar, and Bashar was talking, I don't even know if he was talking about the cube of Saturn in this one. I did hear him talk about that in another video the other day, which was interesting, and I wish I remembered what I said, but when he was talking about time and shifting frequencies and dimensions, it made me think of the planet Saturn. And he said something along the lines of, we're all living in the same exact Earth, but we're not all having the same experience. And he's also talking about different races and groups of aliens, and I think he was talking about how the grays are us, or they're humans in the future, but because, and they look like they do because of how they had to adapt to what they did in the world. But their technology is so advanced that they've been able to come back in time into our timeline or our specific dimension to warn us about what not to do. And they also apparently come to the Earth and get DNA samples from humans to help with the, I think it's the, I can't think of the word I'm thinking of, I guess variety in their gene pool, I believe, since their species can no longer reproduce. And then he's talking about how there are, I believe, 6 hybrid races, and the hybrid races have come back, to channel, they can channel through different, connect telepathically to different channels, different people who can meet them in their frequency to deliver their messages. And my gut feeling about this is that there's many people channeling these beings all the time without even knowing it. And sometimes, we might call them spirit guides, we might call them angels, we might call them aliens or interdimensional beings, but I don't think that I'm alone in feeling this way. And I think that there are a lot of people, especially creative people and gifted kids, empaths, sensitive souls, that are acting as receivers for this information that's being picked up from different dimensions or frequencies. So if we all share the same planet, I believe that there are multiple timelines on the planet. So when enough people from the collective decide something collectively, we create these shifts and these timeline splits and these timeline collapses in the quantum field or the collective field. And I feel like this is happening in a major way right now. So now I want to get into the numerology and the astrology and the themes that we're experiencing that we've already experienced, but ironically that we've already been taught about, almost as if the education system has been preparing us for this. So this is going to get really crazy. I hope you're still with me. So, okay. Today, as I'm making this video, it's 2025, December 2025. So we are about to end a number 9 year in numerology, which is all about completion, dissolution of karma, and the collapse of systems and cycles on the planet. And we are seeing that everywhere in media. one of the reasons I think I was probably inspired to make this video today is because I just watched a documentary this morning, Corey Feldman versus the World. So it's about his experience with his angels. And it's a really interesting documentary. Basically, he's talking about his band, Corey Feldman, or Corey and the Angels. And basically when he describes what that band is, he says he helps lost women make it in the industry, almost as if he's trying to do something nice for them. But when you're watching the documentary, I don't know if these were his intentions when he made it, but just watching the documentary kind of gave me huge ick factor, because I don't think he is aware of how he's coming off to these women. And the women who were in the band were very young, very naive, and seemed like they were completely controlled by them. And there was a couple people, women in the band, who said that he had never paid them. That's another pattern that we've seen with people who have spoken out about Diddy. They haven't been paid. I've heard, was it Aubrey O'Day? And I forget who else. I think some people in making the band with Diddy were talking about how they hadn't got paid, even though they had like platinum selling albums and all this stuff, and their faces were everywhere. And basically in that instance, they're saying like Diddy was essentially holding them hostage, in the same way that these girls, they never flat out said that Corey was holding them hostage, but the whole documentary is about how they lived with him, they traveled with him on tour, he was in charge of what they ate, he would not allow them to go out or to shower or to leave the tour bus. Everybody had to travel in a group. And you even hear him on the documentary say a couple times, I'm not paying you to think for yourself or like to go out on your own. You're getting paid for a project. So it's so interesting when you are perceptive about human behavior, because I'm watching these girls who just look like they can't speak up and they're like afraid. And then there's a lot of times where the girls are like holding back a laugh because he takes himself so seriously and he has no idea like what he's talking about. And it reminded me of my particular instances with other musicians and people in the industry, because what happens a lot is that these people who had success at one point in their life, so washed up, I hate to say it like that, but like washed up childhood stars, or I hate to say, like, I don't want this to sound like an attack on men, but this is just what I've seen and experienced. It's these little men, sometimes actually little men, but men who seem to be stuck in the past about who they once were, and then they get like really old and they're not the star that they once were. Many of them suffer from some kind of abuse themselves from the Hollywood system or the entertainment industry system and structures, and then the abused turn into the abuser, and it's usually, not all the time, but usually a much older man and much younger women. And in a lot of cases, these women are controlled because they don't have their own financial resources, or they're naively chasing a dream. And it's like these people kind of seek each other out, or they align vibrationally, because on one hand, you've got a washed up star who's still trying to stay relevant, and the only way he can control these people is either through his money, if he still has any, or through his name and his image and the fact that he's famous. And then these girls who don't have the financial security or whatever, but they have the looks, they have the talent, they can offer that up in exchange for what they hope to get from him, which is probably a name for themselves or a place of stability, like food and room and board and stuff. So you see a lot of these really unhealthy relationships in the entertainment industry. And this doesn't only extend to the entertainment industry, but it's happening everywhere too. So anyways, all that to say, just kind of creepy to watch that and to see how it mirrors so many other instances and things that are coming up in pop culture right now, like the Diddy trials. And yeah, they even showed Harvey Weinstein stuff in the documentary. So just notice in the last handful of years that more and more people have been speaking up. And I have also noticed personally that in the spiritual community, or people who identify as empaths, as starseeds, as gifted kids, as creatives, as the people who are awakened ones or light workers, we know that we're here to make a difference and serve in the collective awakening. A lot of those people started feeling heavy spiritual attacks in 2023. And that was the number 7 year in numerology. And then number 8 year was ruled by Saturn. So that was 2024. A lot of us started to see karma shift back around. So some of these abusers in the collective field have been, it's come to light what they've been doing. And now we're in the number 9 year, 2025. And a lot of these systems are being shut down. And I'm not sure if any of them have been actually shut down yet, but somebody did point out on my channel the other day that Trump just signed something that prevents the government from doing any kind of, I don't know if it was like specifically like a gate kind of experiment or consciousness experiments. I don't exactly know. I wish I looked it up, but the way that they explained it was that the government can't do these types of experiments anymore. So whether or not that will hold, whether or not that, I didn't verify it. So if anybody wants to jump in and verify it or look it up, since this is just a stream of consciousness walking video, feel free to add it in the comments so we can all discuss it. But if that's the case, then that could be really good news. And another thing that I've spotted this year is the UFO conferences. The fact that whistleblowers who are coming forward to talk about UFOs and disclosure and all this stuff, they are being offered protection and they're actually able to talk about this stuff without sounding crazy. Then, not to mention the fact that the whole gate stuff, this gate awakening, gifted and talented education awakening, is also coming up in the collective consciousness and the field. So where does this all fit in astrologically? Well, astrologically, we have the planet Jupiter, which is currently in Cancer. Cancer represents the past. It represents our childhood. It represents our intuition, our mother wounds, our feminine energy. And Jupiter represents expansion and belief systems. So collectively, in this very moment in time, our collective belief systems as a society are changing. And that's why a lot of us are looking to the past. What happened to me as a kid? Why don't I remember what happened to me in childhood? Why do I have fragmented memories? That's why a lot of this stuff is trending in social media right now. And then some other really interesting cycles to consider and to talk about today are the planet Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus. So those are outer planets in astrology. Outer planets represent generational cycles and they move a lot slower. So these similar cycles don't come back around for a long time. And the best way I can describe astrology is to visualize 12 different clocks. And they're all moving clockwise and then counterclockwise at different rates. And then you may even have those are just the planets, but you could also envision another, dozen clocks or so to represent asteroids and comets that aren't considered the planets that we look at, but there are some astrologers that specialize in asteroids and comets and how they affect our collective consciousness. So that adds even more flavor to the symbolism and the archetypes that astrology explores. So what's so cool about it is that since all 12 of the major planets are moving counterclockwise or clockwise at different rates, because at any given moment, the planets are going to move forward and then we're going to experience retrograde periods, which means they move backward or they appear to be moving backwards in the sky. But every so often you get a perfect alignment of planetary energies and archetypes. Sometimes they only happen once every hundreds of years. And right now we're in the precipice of a lot of these big shifts. So one of those shifts, well, actually, let's talk about two very important planets and how they're both entering Aries. We've got Saturn and Neptune both shifting into Aries in 2026. Why is this significant? First of all, 2026 is a number 1 year in numerology. So the reason why I brought up all this stuff coming up in pop culture and media is because I was showing you how in the number 9 year, we've watched a lot of these cycles really come to a head, and you've watched a lot of changes take place, and things that we never thought we'd see in our lifetime are finally being talked about. We're finally able to talk about SRA and reptilians. I mean, essentially, we're allowed to talk about them on podcasts, and there's huge podcasters that are you have millions of followers and viewers, and they're having guests on there to talk about these things that you wouldn't be allowed to talk about a handful of years ago. So number one is going to be filled with new beginnings. 2026, number one year filled with new beginnings collectively. And before we talk about the planet archetypes, let's jump back to the last time we had a number one cycle. This is going to be cool because so many people I know, myself included, had their first big spiritual awakening back in 2017. What were you doing in 2017? What were you starting then? Because this year in 2025, it's coming to a head. And in the same way that you had an awakening in 2017, in whatever area of your life, probably going to look different for all of us, but that cycle is coming back around again. And every single one of us is getting the opportunity to decide, will we go on the timeline split of the higher timeline, the cycle where we choose to learn from our own past karma, where we stop blaming other people and take personal accountability for what's happening in our life, what's showing up? Or are we going to repeat this 9-year cycle again and choose to remain unconscious and choose to blame other people and to not look in the mirror and take personal accountability? If you choose that path, you are putting yourself on lower level timelines, and your soul might be choosing that. Maybe, we are infinite souls, I believe, and we've all lived infinite lives, I believe. And, the whole concept of an older soul, I think, gets twisted on this planet and can be a very egoic thing, because souls are ultimately infinite. And somebody who's had a lot of incarnations on Earth may be considered an older soul here, while somebody may have had infinite lifetimes on other planets. Their souls could be the same age, but on those other planets there was completely different laws of gravity or laws of the universe on those planets, and they had completely different soul level experiences. So essentially, I believe, and I've heard other people like Bashar and creators that I look up to, and authors like Michael Newton, who wrote Journey of Souls, which is another life-changing book. There's another book called Many Lives, Many Masters by Brian L. Weiss, amazing life-changing book. I think I read both in 2017 or around that time during my big awakening. But there's a lot of people out there that I resonate with who talk about how we are reincarnated and we choose different themes for each lifetime. So some of us may be choosing the lower timeline because we want to learn what it's like to be selfish and to, go down that deep, dark rabbit hole of, I guess, the occult or these scary experiences. And we may choose to go out. When I say go out, I mean to end our life experience through being in a natural disaster or some other thing like that. Because if you think about, if you're an infinite soul and life is just a video game and a simulation, then what's it matter how you exit the simulation or the experiment? We all kind of forget these things when we come here. But if you really, get back in touch with your inner soul and your higher self, I think there's a semblance of remembering, at least for a lot of us, that's why we resonate with a lot of these teachers and why we feel something lit up in our soul when we hear them talk about it. So all of that to say, some of us will be consciously or seemingly unconsciously, but on a soul level, may be consciously choosing lower timelines, while others of us may be choosing the unity timeline. So I think what is happening, we're seeing similar themes that we experienced during the pandemic, where you had people sharing the same planet who had completely different experiences. And I've mentioned this in other videos, how some people had, they were watching people pass away left and right, forced to get jabs, maybe even lost their job and had a horrible experience during the pandemic. And then others who used that time to do some kind of self-improvement or learn some kind of new skill, or buy land, or graduate college, or do something that improved their life ahead. And then of course there's people that blew through their stimulus money, and we all had choices to make that year that placed us on first initial timeline. That was like, I think, the first initial evidence that we were experiencing such a big split, and almost like a foreshadowing of what might be to come. But what I learned personally that year is that I've never been a stronger believer that we live in our own energy field. Even though we're sharing a planet with other people, our own vibration can absolutely influence what we experience and what we attract into our individual experience. And there are so many people in the world, even though there's the illusion of, you know, law enforcement people and military and, you know, the hierarchy of the pyramid that runs the country. I'm not telling anyone to go break laws or anything like that, but I'm just saying that there's people on top and there's a lot more people on the bottom. So even if all the people on top were ever doing something that the majority of the people at the bottom didn't believe, convenient time for a plane to come, don't you think? All right, it's gonna turn around. But if the people at the bottom decided that they didn't like what the people on top were doing, there's enough people that there's not enough people on top to come and enforce that on the people below, unless there's some kind of crazy technology or something. But even then, I can't imagine that they would be able to get all of us. And this is also reflecting in the current astrology and the upcoming astrology of 2026. So let's break that down. We have Saturn, the school of hard knocks, the gatekeeper of ascension, of lessons. You gotta, you know, new levels, new devils. You gotta beat the villain in the video game before you can ascend to the next level. So I think a lot of us are experiencing that now. And I don't know if you're anything like me, but like when my Hollywood experiences happened, the one that I share about, you know, my group of people who I felt were attacking and harassing me, all that stuff happened in a number 7 or in the number 7 year, the year that a lot of other people were also experiencing spiritual attacks. Then the number 8 year, the people, but mainly one person in particular who was part of that group, publicly fell from his pedestal, and the negative things that he was up to were exposed to a group. And that is Saturn at play there. That is Saturn and karma exposing people for their true character, and people falling from grace that year, and people, oh, this feels like it's getting windy, and people reaping what they have previously sown. So the number 9 year is what I've noticed in my own life is like I'm just tired a lot, and there's been a lot of endings and a lot of reflection about where I want to go next and what I want to do next. And I can feel this shift happening, and I can see it in the media. It all seems to be alluding to disclosure coming soon, to different leaders stepping up. What do you think gifted children and gate children were prepared for? All of you who think that gate was one big experiment and that the government has been keeping track of these kids and they have our record somewhere, you might not be wrong. Not saying you're right either, but not saying you're wrong. Just saying that those of us who feel like we've been kept track of or on watch, and those of us who are remembering GATE and the gifted programs right now, we're all remembering how being a leader was instilled within us. We were being shaped for something. My question is, are we being shaped for what's happening now? Because Saturn, which is going into Aries, the last time it was in Aries was the 90s, okay? So how many of us grew up at that time? If you grew up or lived through the 90s, so you're either born in the 90s, so you're born as a soul with the soul signature of the energy of that time, so Saturn in Aries, and Saturn in Pisces, which is what we just got through, which is what we have retrograded back into, so one or the other or both that time. But also those of us who were doing GATE at that time, that is significant. Those of us, there's a lot of us probably doing other things in the 90s too. Maybe you were part of the technology shift and helping people understand how to integrate computers and the internet. So whatever your soul chose to do was very important during the 90s, because it's coming back around again. And that was also the last time in human history that we may ever know the difference between growing up as a kid, riding bikes till it was dark, not being attached to this digital leash that we call a cell phone, and suddenly being in this world where all we know is Google and AI and just being connected to the system. And then people like Sabrina Wallace, who claims to be a DARPA survivor and talk about the DARPA experiments and stuff, she says that we've all been hooked up to a cloud in the 90s. So I'm not endorsing or denying those claims. I don't know if they're true or not. I'm just telling you what she talks about, so you can check out her content and decide for yourself. But Sabrina Wallace, a lot of people talk about her and find validity in what she's talking about. And if you look into the history and the patents that are out there, maybe you kind of, it hits a little closer to home and you're like, maybe it's not as wild as it sounds. But she does talk about how we've been hooked up to this digital cloud and the satellites since the 90s, and the biometric field, and the fact that our cell phone, not only is it spying on us with microphones and stuff, and I think there might even be some Google or I think it's Google policy changes or Facebook policy changes on December 16th. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but like you have to opt out of AI being able to record every single cell phone conversation and go back into your phone with your old photos and old conversations, because now it will allegedly, supposedly have access to all of these things. So somebody let us know if that's true or not and how we can opt out. I don't know. That's a scary thought. But, and phones also, like smartwatches and stuff like that, being able to track your heart rate and how many steps you've taken, etc. So they know like essentially everything about us, and it makes you wonder if shows like the Westworld were truth hiding in plain sight, and we're all essentially on these robots. I actually did a whole video about it, like how is your life being predicted? So that is on my channel. You can check my playlist section on YouTube, and I separate a lot of this in different categories, whether that's MK Ultra Monarch, Gate program, or psychic awakenings and gateway tapes and astral experiences. And then I have one for alien disclosure movement as well. So if you're ever interested in one specific topic, I categorize my videos through my playlist, so you can always find them over there. But back to the fact that the 90s were the last time that we all kind of lived through the last time that we may ever remember or experience a natural life that's not just ruled by technology. That's significant. And because that time back then is intersecting with what is happening right now. Another big planet that has a cycle ending, a much longer cycle. So Saturn is ending a 30-year cycle in 2026, and Neptune is ending a cycle that's been going on since the 1800s. Was it 1865? My history might be off, but it was 1800s during the Civil War, during all of that political madness. And what is interesting about that is that we've had a movie just come out in the last year, I think it came out in 2024, called Civil War with Kirsten Dunst. And what's so interesting about that movie is they show a civil war happening on US soil, and it's kind of like every man for themselves. There's multiple times in that movie where you hear the main character, who is a journalist, and they're trying to make their way to the Capitol to like meet with the president or something. That's what the whole movie's about. So they're like traveling throughout the United States, which is a shit show, and you've got people just like every man for himself, and some people are like resorting to their violent reptilian natures. And then you hear them reference people who are just living on a farm, acting like none of this is happening. And I think that is literally foreshadowing what is to come. And I want it to be wrong. I was talking about how prophetic dreams and stuff like that aren't always right. Predictive programming doesn't have to be right. But I also think that sometimes we can't stop what's coming. So not to scare anyone, but hopefully to empower people. Like, you don't have to go to the lower timeline, but since and if if my theory is right, and all these other people who talk about the multiverse and how we're sharing one Earth, but there's different timelines and dimensions within that one Earth field. If Earth is a single space and time, there's a lot of different experiences and dimensions within that Earth that we can be having. So yes, we will might be sharing an energetic space with things like this going on. And I hope to God that it's not going to be attacks or anything bad like that. But because AI is also involved, there might also be fake news and, Project Bluebeam stuff, acting like these attacks are real, and they may not be. They may just be propaganda tools to get people scared enough to comply for the real New World Order plans in 2030. So I'm not going to jump far ahead into that yet. I want to focus on 2026 and 2026. So not only do we have the 30-year Saturn cycle ending, which reflects what was going on in the 90s. So a huge shift in technology and how we use the internet. And then we have, at the same time, within the same month, we have the shift of Neptune from Pisces to Aries, which is completing, I don't think it's quite, or I think it's a little over 100-year cycle. So it's like 100 and something year cycle. So since the late 1800s, when it was in the same energy as a civil war, which ironically we were taught about in school. And then we have one of the third outer planets, which shifts sign every 7 years, but the last time it made its full rotation in every sign around the zodiac, Uranus, the last time it completed its full zodiac cycle was back in the 40s, which is when Roswell happened. The alien tech was introduced. The CIA was formed. The Tavistock Institute was formed. Cold War, psychic spies and psychic research, interest in parapsychology, all that stuff was happening in the 1940s. So next year, and even right now, we're already seeing themes of it. We're overlapping themes of civil war. So look at politics, okay? Love thy neighbor, because your neighbors are gonna be important. And also themes of advanced technology and ET disclosure, UFO disclosure, which was happening in the 40s, and then 90s, and the world changing because of the internet. So there could be some other technology that comes out next year that changes everything. And hopefully it's going to be positive changes, right? So, and I think maybe it will be based on what timeline you align yourself with. And one of the ways you can align yourself into a better or more ideal timeline is to stop giving your emotional energy to these bad things that you think are going to happen, and put your emotional energy on the positive things that you do want to happen, that you do want to create. Because I'm not saying that there won't be bad things that happen, but I'm just saying, in the same way that some people never were affected by the pandemic, you can also shift yourself to timelines and Earth experiences, even within the same timeline, where you're acting like an observer, watching through a clear glass window at these things that are happening to other people, but they're not happening to you, because you've consciously chosen and co-created your life to go on a different path. So since two of these outer planets are shifting from Pisces to Aries, one of the reasons why we're feeling the heavy energy that we are right now during December of 2025 is that they're in the last degrees of Pisces, and 29 degrees of Pisces is the very last degree of the zodiac cycle. So it represents all the karma that has happened, that has been leading up to that moment. So you've got the entire karma of the entire zodiac wheel falling on the 29 degrees of Pisces. So heck yeah, you're tired. You are hibernating, you are cocooning, you are deciding what's going to come in to the next timeline with you, which is only a couple of weeks away. And then we've got Gemini, which is your neighborhood, your community. Aries and Gemini energy, leaders of new communities, leaders of separate communities. Are you one of the people looking at you gate kids who were groomed to be leaders? Are you going to step up and be a leader in your community? So hopefully you have found what you're passionate about in this lifetime. Maybe you were groomed or, inspired or persuaded by different teachers to do X, Y, or Z in your life. whether I heard somebody talk about hydroponics gardening, how they learned that in GATE, and I thought that was cool and interesting, because look at our food systems now and how our food system is, how we need to decentralize the food system and start supporting local farmers again. So I would be looking at the GATE kids, and I'd also be asking myself, those of you who were taught that stuff in GATE, were you taught hydroponic gardening and things like that, because they were skills that somewhere somebody knew that we would need someday, whether that was intuitively because projects like Project Looking Glass, which could actually predict future timelines, knew that these events were going to happen, so they prepared accordingly. They taught, ooh, crazy chills right now, this is so wild. They taught the leaders of the next generation to do this stuff because they knew that we would need everything from influencers and people who could relate to other people, to influence other people to step up and rise into their power. So we need leaders in the, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the ascension of consciousness, the sharing of higher consciousness ideas. But we also need foot soldiers and people on the ground, those who are going to be the new generation of farmers, those who are going to help us use technology in a positive way that's not going to destroy the planet. So whatever you were trained to do in GATE, I think might be very important. And I know that there's a lot of people interested in the GATE awakening who have been talking about like how it's a negative thing that we've been being groomed, and we've been groomed against our will, and a lot of us are addicts and alcoholics. But I would ask you to look back at what you were being groomed to do, because if there is any connection with monarch programming and personality tests being done at a very young age, whether that was in GATE at 6 or 7 when you tested into the program and they saw you were gifted in math, you were gifted in science, you were gifted in language arts, you were gifted in art, creative writing, or creative performance. There's a reason why they looked at all those things, because they knew that all of those things would be important when the world needed it right now. So I also would invite you to watch one of my latest videos, GATE and Monarch Programming, where we prepared to lead disclosure. Because when you're looking at the astrology of next year and everything that's circling around, everything that is ending right now, I'm seeing this connection. Like, yeah, there's a lot of us who are going to be asked to step up in leadership positions, and a lot of us who are already doing it and have been doing it our whole lives without even realizing it. Maybe you've been a trendsetter your whole life and had no idea why people always gravitated towards you and your energy or whatever. But so that, those two planets in Aries, and I feel like there is another thought that I'm trying to remember right now. But yeah, us being prepared to step up as leaders of our community at this time. And I feel like there's something else, but maybe I'm not supposed to remember what I was going to say. Oh, I was going to say, yeah, part of the reason why we're feeling all this now is because of the Pisces energy bringing in all these endings and all these karmic cycles closing. But by the time we reach 2026, we're going to feel that first shift January 26th, around that time. Second shift is going to be February 13th and 14th, around that time. And the third big shift is going to be by April. So by the start of the zodiac new year, which is going to be springtime, which is going to be Aries season. So something, may happen in Aquarius season. So the end of January and February. So that's the future mind, the higher mind, chaos and change. Chaos doesn't always have to be a bad thing. It can be for some people, but it can also be exciting, invigorating. So does that mean something like disclosure is going to happen that year? Does that just mean maybe the first seeds of disclosure like being planted that year? It could probably manifest in a lot of different ways. Could that be new technology that comes out in February? I don't know. But the next big shift will be in April. So hopefully there won't be like an explosive war or anything like that. But hopefully people will rise in consciousness and start to see through those patterns before then, so we don't have to repeat the cycles of the past. And does anybody else find it extremely interesting that a plane comes by every time I'm trying to say something important? No. Does anybody else find it interesting that, if we're going really conspiracy now, we're talking about monarch programming and the 13 bloodlines and Fritz Springmeier's work, who talks about the 13 bloodlines. So all that conspiracy lore. and how, you know, the eye in the pyramid, how the Rockefeller, is it the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers, whoever created the education system and the curriculum for that, why did they put such an emphasis on the Civil War, racism, and World War II? The Nazi experiments, does that sound like anything that people have been talking about when it comes to Gates or anything like that? Or some of these super soldier experiments? I don't know. Or what else was going on in the 40s, like the UFO and sightings and Roswell crash and the creation of like National Security Act and CIA and all that. So is it a surprise to anyone that those themes are coming back around? And is that because they were implanting those things in our consciousness at a young age? So those themes would live inside of us in the back of our mind somewhere. So were they lessons planted so we don't repeat the mistakes of the past? Or were they there to prepare us for what was to come in the future because they were aware of these archetypal cycles? Because time is a flat circle, and if you go back in time, you can see the future outcome. And one thing too I really want to talk about is 2012, because that is the year that Project Looking Glass stopped working, and it's also the year that the Mayan calendar, where people thought the world was going to end, because that's when the Mayan calendar stopped. But what most people don't understand is that in 2011, the Mayan calendar stopped from being a predictive cycle to now we're in the cycle of co-creating our lives with the universe. So it's called the testing period, or the testing cycle of humanity. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it ends in 2030, which is when a lot of people are talking about the New World Order, but also the official timeline split. And that will be a number 5 year in numerology, which is Mercury, which is your community. So maybe there will be changes in our local communities or how we communicate then. A lot of people also predict that by that time in 2030, we'll have the ability to communicate and understand, you know, the whole purpose of life and extraterrestrials. And then something that stuck out to me from Bashar's video the other day is how he's talking about how in every human history cycle, from the Egyptian times to what was going on in ancient Chinese civilizations, to Atlantis, to Greeks and Greek mythology, Roman mythology, all that stuff, there was always some kind of sky god, or even like Jesus times, the coming of Christ. So every great civilization has prepared for this coming. So is this go around in the life cycle going to be, you know, some people think that Jesus is making his return, but what if Jesus was an alien? Or what if we are visited by other beings that show their true form? What if it's the Annunaki? I don't know, but I've also covered in other videos, made this connection with the Annunaki, and one of the books that came out in the 80s, I think it was the 80s or 90s, or somewhere right in between, which was aligning with Saturn and Aries and Saturn and Pisces, the last time it was in that cycle. Bringers of the New Dawn came out, and that book was about the war on this planet between reptilians and then like Pleiadians and higher consciousness beings. And it was talking about how humans were seeded from the DNA of 12 different species. So are humans going to be the next hybrid species? Is that the disclosure that we're going to learn about? Is that what society is kind of leading up towards? And then to connect it to something else, 2027 is a year that also keeps coming up, the Hopi Prophecy. So I'm not exactly familiar with the Hopi Prophecy. And again, I'm drawing from memory because I read a lot of content, and a lot of this is just like intuitive downloads as I'm walking through nature right now. But I'm thinking of another video I saw from Jordan Crowder. I really like his channel, and he's been coming up in my feed a lot lately. And one of his videos was talking about, I think it was the Hopi Prophecy and the blue light that's going to be aligning with the red star, which he thinks is our sun. And I forget exactly what the point was, but basically I think he was coming to some of the same conclusions. Like, is that going to be when we meet the extraterrestrials, or when disclosure happens? But another thing that I think is so interesting about the blue star or the blue light is that a lot of us are already holding this frequency. So first of all, blue on the color spectrum in the chakra energy field is your third eye, the pineal gland. It also is reminding me of indigo souls or blue-ray souls. So The Alchemist talks about that on her channel. Dolores Cannon talks about indigo wave of volunteers. Are we already here? And we've been helping humans. I got chills again. Have we been helping, you know, those of us who resonate with the indigo frequency? Have we already been slowly preparing for disclosure? Is this what the gate kids were? Were the gate kids, the neurodivergent kids, the ones, even the ones who didn't get chosen for gate because their parents opted out or because they didn't live in a school that was doing it? Are these the, the chosen ones? I hate that term, but the ones who already naturally came with these chakra centers activated, or this inner knowing activated, and we've been stuck in these human bodies and going through the veil of amnesia and have forgotten about it. But there are DNA codes that have been activated in certain beings, and we've already been here guiding people, helping people, and also having our own experience and our own awakening, but kind of like all seems to be in preparation for this. So 2026, things are probably going to happen. The timeline split might actually start happening. Disclosure, I wonder if 2027 is going to be the year that we have official contact, or that we, meet the sky gods or have the second coming. But also we have to remember that if the government and if the people who are running the country, the shadow government, the elites, whatever you want to call them, if they've already known about this, then they've also made preparations for things like Project Bluebeam, so they can still attempt to control the narrative. And now, conveniently, AI is coming out, and now, conveniently, we don't know how to tell anymore what's real versus what's not, because there was a Florida mall incident. I don't know what happened with that. I've heard Elizabeth April talk about it on her channel, but the Florida mall incident, people like not being allowed to talk about it, or maybe there are some theories floating around that there were some crisis actors involved. Some people thought it might have been a Project Bluebeam experiment. Some people thought that it was real extraterrestrials crossing over into our dimension and they had some kind of like technology fluke or something. So I'm not exactly sure, and I'd love to hear your theories of what you think the Miami or the Florida mall scenario was about. Was that a preview of Project Bluebeam? So that's something for people to be aware about. Like, as this shift is happening, this shift in consciousness where we have to align our frequency in order to cross over into the timeline or the frequency for the experience that we want. And then again, as the individual, we get to decide, is ET contact, is this change in technology, is this future that we're alive for, is it going to be something that we're excited about, that we get to live at a time where technology is changing? And, just because there's bad things that happen, there's also like good things that can come out of it too. So I like to believe that we are sovereign beings. I like to teach people that we are sovereign beings. And my real life experience thus far in my 38 years has been that I am a sovereign being. And when I started claiming that, that's when I started to have more control over my individual timeline and my own individual earthly experience. And that's not to say that I don't dip into sad emotions. Like, I was crying earlier today because I had a dream, but like, I get out of it very quickly. And I understand that every time I cry, every time I hurt, every time that I've been, shown the devil in real life and met him face to face, I have always been able to alchemize that. And I think that's the point of this earthly experience, is that, if you choose on some level, and if you could admit to yourself that you're choosing on some level to experience these terrible things where you meet the devil face to face and you have all these negative experiences, maybe you're consciously choosing that so you can alchemize it, so you can assist in the evolution of consciousness on the planet, so that you can step up into a leadership position, which is going to be asking us to do. You're going to see the next wave of leaders. You already saw it this year. It already started in March and April and May of this year. You started seeing new leaders rise around that time. People were being activated into their new position, and then we've retrograded back into Pisces. So back into the closing of cycles, back into clearing out our own karma and really making sure that we're ready to be the next generation of leaders. And you're going to see all of us officially step into our power, those who are called to do so, those who are being called to step up for their community. You're going to see them start to really be in their leadership positions, making an impact, making a difference come January, February, and especially after April of next year. And then, like I said, I think that's going to start us off on a new timeline. I think there may be some exciting things happening in 2027. And I think by the year 2030, which will be a number 5 in numerology, which is ruled by Mercury, but some astrologers say it's ruled by Uranus, which can be shocking changes, but also movement and travel. So there may be some exciting things that happen that year too. And I know that there's a lot of people, I get crossover from occult viewers and also like Starseed and empaths on my channel. So Sometimes there can be a lot of fear around the year 2030 because it's like the New World Order. Are we going to be, you know, are they taking away all our freedoms? Are we going to live in a society where there's like surveillance everywhere? Maybe that is one possibility. But I think the timeline shift that is happening right now, that you're being prepared for right now, is setting us up to also experience a 2030 where we're getting the benefits of technology. Could it be the kind of technology that creates free energy, that creates instant manifestation of food that's healthy, a rejuvenation of the crops on this planet, peace and harmony and unity in society? Is that what we can also experience? Those of us who are ready, those of us who consciously choose to do so, those of us who consciously use our gifts that the universe has blessed us as an individual with, those of us who collectively share that with the community. Because when you serve the whole, the whole serves you. I think I heard that from Bashar last night on his video, and I just absolutely love that. And I think there's going to be a timeline for stepping up to serve your community, whatever way that, you know, is you. So are you, how you serve your community is through what you're passionate about. So like, are you passionate about building? Are you passionate about learning? Are you passionate about teaching? Are you passionate about working with people one-on-one? Are you passionate about acting and making people laugh? Are you passionate about growing plants and doing sustainable fashion or things like that? So everything that you're passionate about matters. And that is like the most important thing that anyone watching this video should be concerned about, is following that passion, because that raises your frequency and it raises the frequency of those around you. So that's why a lot of occultists and negative groups have been interested in those who shine their light bright. But the time on the planet has passed for them to stifle our gifts or steal our power, because those portals have closed. We are in the timeline now. We are in the home stretch where the spiritual attacks are ending, and they've prepared us. If we've used those time periods properly and we've alchemized it, then we have had the opportunity to become the leaders that we're meant to be right now. So if you're still with me, then yes, I'm talking to you. You are being called to step up as a leader in your own way, in your own right. Every position matters. Everything you're passionate about matters. And that is how we're going to collectively raise the frequency of the planet, heal the planet, like not trash it anymore. And I really do believe that humanity is capable of doing so, because I'm already experiencing a lot of soul family on this channel, that we're finding each other in the comments. We are relating to the things that we say to each other, and there's an absolute, I think I absolutely can feel that collective energy shift. So if you're tired right now, just know that this time is gonna pass. Nothing is falling apart, and if it is falling apart, it's falling apart for a good reason. Just if we can reframe how we are thinking about it, and understand what is to come and why we feel like we're falling apart, why we may feel like our life is on pause right now, and know that it's all for the greater good, and that your soul intentionally decided to come here at this time because you wanted to be here during this crazy shift. So thank you for watching this video. If you are interested in your own personal astrology cycles, I absolutely love working with people one-on-one for astrology readings. So all of my information is in my description. And what I'm super psyched about when it comes to personal astrology readings is you can see where Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus are in your chart. Your soul is intentional about that, especially because those are long-term planets. They stay in one area of your chart for like your entire life. So what did you specifically come here to do with that energy? Where is it hitting your personal chart? Is it in your 5th house? Are you supposed to be in the public eye? Is it the 10th house, which is about your career and your mission? Is it about your 4th house, about mother energy or feminine intuition? Is it about the 6th house, routines and health and body? Is it about 3rd house, communication, writing a book, making a social media channel, a podcast, whatever? Like me as an example, mine is all in my 3rd house right now. So I can see that I'm in alignment with what my chart is telling me that I'm meant to be doing at this time on the planet. And it's not by design that I was drawn to start making these videos, and why it all started happening when it did. My channel started taking off when Saturn went into Aries or I think it was Neptune into Aries, which was the first preview of this shift. And that's not by mistake. So I think my soul chose to be here. It chose to communicate and share ideas. And I think that's part of my soul mission. So if you want to know what yours is, definitely think about booking an astrology reading with me. And I also have a moon calendar if you can't afford a reading. Those are only 11/11, and they teach you how to track your moon cycle. So you can learn a lot from that calendar. It shows you how to track your personal planets, and then from there you can Google a lot of this information and figure it out on your own if you can't afford a reading. So that's why I include those tools for you as well. And I also have an ESP development course on my page in the description of every video. The ESP development course teaches you how to remote view. It teaches you the difference between remote viewing and lucid dreaming, tips for lucid dreaming also, and then how to raise your consciousness and your discernment and your energetic boundaries, which are going to be crucial at this time. So if you're interested in any of those things, check out my description, and I'll see you guys in the next video.